Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into the cozy weekend traditions of 1950s Britain. Not the ration books and bomb shelters you might picture from wartime, but the warmth of everyday family rituals after the war, steaming kettles, polished shoes, quiet Sundays, and laughter by the fire. You might think weekends were dull back then, but trust me, they were full of small joys that shaped a generation. The sort of moments that didn't make headlines, yet linger gently in memory. The smell of coal smoke drifting along the street, the glow of a kitchen lamp on a dark evening, the quiet hum of a wireless program while a family settles in together. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps more than you know. And I'm always curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. I love seeing our little global community connect through these stories. People listening from different corners of the world, yet all joining the same quiet journey through history. Now, before we step into the past, take a moment to dim the lights around you. Maybe switch on a fan or let a window stay slightly open so there's a gentle background hum. Get comfortable, ease yourself into the pillow, and let's begin together. Picture it, a narrow street somewhere in Britain, a Friday evening in the mid 1950s. The working week has ended. Along the terraced houses, curtains are being drawn, and the first lamps glow warmly behind frosted glass. If you listen closely, you might hear the soft rattle of a coal scuttle being carried inside, the scrape of shoes on a front step, or the faint voices of neighbors exchanging good nights as they pass. There's a sense of release in the air, that quiet sigh a household makes when the week is behind them and the weekend has just begun. Inside one home, the kettle begins to hum, filling the kitchen with gentle steam. A mother sets out chip but cherished teacups while her children wait for the comforting routine of fish and chips wrapped in paper. The paper crackles as it's opened, the sharp scent of vinegar rising. Maybe a father settles into his chair, his jacket hung neatly on the back of the door, and switches on the radio. The BBC Light program hums softly, offering music and laughter that fills the corners of the room. Can you hear it? That mix of clinking cups, children's giggles, and the friendly voice from the wireless? In another house just a few doors down, a young woman prepares for her evening out. She polishes her shoes until they shine, sprays a dab of perfume from a treasured bottle, and checks her hair one last time in a small round mirror. Her parents exchange knowing glances. The war years were not so long ago, and seeing their daughter step confidently into a brighter future feels like a blessing. Outside, the street carries her away into the bustle of the town, where cinemas glow with neon signs and music spills out from cafes. And yet, just as important are the homes that remain quiet. A grandmother knitting by the fire, her needles clicking softly in the stillness. A child tucked in bed early, tracing pictures in a well-worn storybook. A young couple brewing cocoa and sharing biscuits, laughing over the week's small troubles. These are the moments of ordinary life, yet they were the heart of weekends in the 1950s, tender, modest, but profoundly human. As you listen tonight, imagine yourself stepping into those scenes. Which of these traditions would feel most comforting if you were there? Would it be the kettle whistling as a table is laid, or the walk through a dusky street where the lamps glow golden against the cool air. Perhaps the sound of the radio, steady and calm, while a family gathers close together. Take your time. Breathe slowly. Let those images soften your thoughts as we drift gently further into the weekend world of 1950s Britain. Friday evenings in 1950s, Britain had a special rhythm of their own, a gentle but unmistakable shift from the tired weight of the week into the lighter promise of rest. Picture it, a row of brick terraces, the kind where the gardens are small, the chimneys lean close together, and the pavements carry the sound of footsteps clearly. Men are making their way home from factories, offices, and workshops. Some carry small pay packets, folded and crisp, still warm from being passed across a counter. Others swing their bicycles against the railings, glad to be done with the shift, their hands still smelling faintly of oil or ink. There is a satisfaction in the air, not grand or loud, but steady, like the contented exhale after a long breath. Inside the homes, the atmosphere is busy but comforting. A mother has already swept the hearth, shaken out the rug, and put the kettle on. The children, who have been waiting for hours, dart from window to window, hoping to spot their father turning the corner. Their patience is rewarded when the latch clicks, the door swings open, and he steps in, shaking off the chill. His jacket is hung neatly, his shoes tapped clean on the mat. He smiles, tired but softened by the sight of his family. In his pocket lies that precious wage packet, not large by modern standards, but enough to allow for a treat at the end of the week. On the table, wrapped in thick white paper and already releasing their aroma, are fish and chips. The vinegar has soaked into the batter just enough to give that tang you can almost taste from across the room. The paper crackles as it is unwrapped, steam rising in little curls. Fingers reach eagerly, and soon everyone has a portion, hot and hearty. It is not a feast of abundance, but in that moment it feels like one. After years when ration books dictated every ounce of butter or sugar, these simple meals carry an almost festive joy. The rationing that stretched on into the early 1950s had only recently ended, and families were rediscovering the pleasure of small indulgences. A bar of chocolate here, a splash of cream there, and on Friday evenings, a warm, greasy parcel from the local chippy. Can you picture unwrapping those paper packets, steam rising as you gather around the table? The warmth spreads across the room, mingling with the golden lamplight that flickers against wallpaper patterned in florals or faded stripes. The air is filled with chatter, the children sharing their small adventures from school, the parents exchanging news about neighbors or workplace gossip. In the corner, the wireless hums with the familiar tones of the BBC Light program, offering light music, comedy sketches, or a drama that drifts comfortably into the background. The sound of laughter on the radio blends with the laughter at the table, weaving a cocoon of safety and ease. In another house down the street, the same ritual is unfolding with its own flavor. A father, freshly shaved and spritzed, with a touch of cologne, counts coins carefully before setting them in his wife's hand. It is payday, after all, and while the money is never enough to spare much, there is dignity in placing it proudly into the household tin. Perhaps a mother smooths the notes with her fingers, already calculating how much will go to rent, how much to groceries, how much she might save toward a new dress or a radio set. For the children, though, payday means something much simpler: the chance of a sweet from the corner shop on Saturday morning, the thrill of choosing between barley sugar, toffee, or perhaps the novelty of American chewing gum that has begun to appear. Imagine the scents that fill the street itself. The smoky breath of coal fires rises from chimneys, mingling with the salty tang of fried fish carried home in paper. Neighbors nod to each other, stopping for a brief chat beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp. Some share a cigarette, the glowing tip flaring against the dusk. Others hurry along, children tugging at their hands, eager to get indoors before the chips grow cold. There is a modest sense of prosperity now, just beginning to replace the shadows of war. Families notice it in small things: a new set of curtains, the first television set appearing in a neighbor's living room, the gleam of a polished bicycle ready for a weekend ride. The austerity years are ending, and though Britain is far from wealthy, there is a fragile hope in these Friday evenings, stitched into the routines of ordinary people. Later, once the paper wrappings have been folded away and the last drops of tea poured from the pot, the family settles into a quieter rhythm. A child might curl up with a library book, tracing the words with a finger while the fire crackles. The father leans back, closing his eyes for a moment as the week's fatigue catches up with him. The mother hums softly as she folds the paper from the fish and chips, setting it aside for kindling tomorrow. The wireless continues, its voices calm, a steady companion. Do you feel it? That quiet glow of contentment at the week's end? The streets outside are darkening, the lamps shining steadily, the sound of bicycles clattering into sheds, and dogs barking as their owners return. It is the pause before the weekend unfolds, the first sip of rest after days of labor. Hold that feeling close and let it carry you into the heart of 1950s Britain, where weekends were built not of extravagance, but of warmth, routine, and togetherness. Saturday mornings in 1950s Britain carried a cheerful, bustling rhythm. After the quiet draw of Friday evening, the weekend truly began with the life of the high street and the market. Imagine stepping out of a modest terraced house, pulling your coat a little tighter against the morning chill, and joining the flow of people making their way toward the town center. The air is cool, but it is alive with sound, voices calling greetings, bicycle bells ringing, the shuffle of shoes against cobbles still damp from a night's rain. The high street itself is a patchwork of color and sound. Greengrocer stalls spill over with fruits and vegetables, stacked in neat pyramids that promise freshness and care. The butcher's shop is open wide, its counters gleaming with cuts of meat. The butcher himself in a striped apron ready with a practiced smile. Shopkeepers stand at their doors, nodding to familiar faces, calling out offers, and exchanging news of the neighborhood. There is a sense that everyone knows one another, or at least recognizes the familiar rhythm of the same footsteps, the same voices, week after week. In one corner of the market, a child walks carefully, clutching a small coin purse. Inside is a shilling, pressed into their hand by their mother with firm but gentle instructions. Bring back the eggs, love, and mind you count the change. The purse feels heavier than it should, not in weight, but in responsibility. The child threads through the crowd, eyes wide at the displays. Oranges shining like little suns, apples polished to a soft sheen, carrots still dusted with soil. The scent of citrus is sharp and almost exotic, reminding everyone that such fruits, once scarce under rationing, are now slowly returning to shelves. The child pauses at the greengrocer's stall, staring at a basket piled with eggs, their shells speckled and fragile. With careful words, they ask for a dozen, holding out the coin with both hands. The grocer, a kindly man with rolled up sleeves, smiles at the earnestness and wraps the eggs tenderly in paper. Coins clink as change is counted back, each one ringing like a note of accomplishment. Can you picture that moment? The pride of carrying something home safely, of completing a small task that feels very grown up? The eggs are tucked carefully into the crook of an arm, and the walk back will be cautious, every step taken with care. Elsewhere on the street, a young couple lingers at a shop window. The display shows a new radio set, sleek and modern, or perhaps a pair of nylons folded neatly in their packet. They talk in low voices, considering, calculating, wondering if this week might be the week they allow themselves a little indulgence. Consumer goods are appearing more frequently now, small signs that Britain is rebuilding. After years of austerity, people savor the chance to choose, even if choices are still modest. The sounds of the market layer upon one another, creating a melody of everyday life. A woman calls out the price of her cabbages, her voice carrying above the crowd. The butcher's knife thunks rhythmically against the block as he chops. A baby cries, soothed quickly by a rocking pram and the gentle hum of its mother's voice. Wooden trolley wheels clatter over cobblestones, iron rims striking sparks of sound. The air smells of earth from the vegetables, tangy citrus, and the faint metallic scent of coins exchanged again and again. Step back for a moment and imagine yourself in that scene. Perhaps you are carrying your own basket, lined with a cloth, filling it with flour, tea, and sugar. Each item is chosen carefully, not in the endless abundance we know today, but in the satisfaction of knowing what will be cooked, shared, and enjoyed over the weekend. Maybe you pause to chat with a neighbor, comparing the quality of tomatoes or discussing the weather. In these small exchanges, there is community, reassurance, and continuity, the ordinary rituals that make life feel steady and whole. Children often linger at the sweet shop, their noses pressed against the glass, eyes sparkling at the jars of humbigs, barley sugar, and toffees. Even a single penny buys something to savor, wrapped in a twist of paper. The shopkeeper, often stern but fair, measures carefully, tipping sweets into a small bag that crackles as it is handed over. That simple pleasure of choosing, of feeling the weight of possibility in even the smallest coin, was a highlight of many childhood Saturdays. The pace of the morning is not rushed, though the market is lively. People move steadily, with time to spare, with time to greet. with time to notice the rhythm of the town around them. You can imagine the sunlight breaking through, glinting off shop windows, warming the chill from the cobbles. The church clock chimes the hour, and the sound folds itself naturally into the day. And as you picture all of this, let yourself pause for a gentle question. What would you choose to buy with a single shilling on a crisp Saturday morning? Would it be the sweetness of oranges, now so precious after years of scarcity? Would it be a bag of boiled sweets, shared slowly and with delight? Or perhaps something practical, like flour or eggs, carrying with it the promise of puddings and pies baked in a warm kitchen later that day? Hold that thought and let the gentle bustle of the market surround you. The sounds, the scents, the soft press of people all moving with quiet purpose. In these simple errands and exchanges, life in 1950s Britain found its comfort, its rhythm, and its joy. And as the morning brightens, the town hums with the gentle satisfaction of a community at ease with itself, preparing for the pleasures of the weekend still to come. Saturday afternoons in 1950s Britain were alive with energy, each family or group finding their own way to savor the free hours. For some, it was the call of the football terraces, that weekly pilgrimage to stand shoulder to shoulder with neighbors and strangers alike. For others, it was the gentle adventure of a trip to the seaside, wrapping scarves tight against the breeze, the taste of salt already imagined before they had even left their street. These were hours of joy stitched firmly into the rhythm of the week, not extravagant, not indulgent, but brimming with life. Picture a teenage boy, tall but still awkward in his movements, setting off from home with a group of friends. Their voices are excited, teasing, rising into laughter as they hurry along the pavement. Each one carries coins saved from odd jobs or pocket money, just enough for the entry fee and perhaps a shared pie. The stadium looms in the distance, its iron gates flung open, the smell of fried onions and pastry drifting out to meet them. As they step inside, the sound swells, chants rising, drums of feet stamping on wooden terraces, whistles and cheers bouncing against the roof. He finds his place among the crowd, pressed between men in heavy coats, the steam of breath clouding in the crisp air. The pitch stretches out below, vivid green against the dull winter sky. When the whistle blows, the roar is immediate, a wave of sound that seems to shake the boy's very chest. Every near miss brings groans. Every goal sparks an eruption of cheers, arms raised, voices carried together. Even if you're not a football fan, there's something comforting in a crowd all cheering as one, a sense of belonging greater than words. The boy feels it deeply, the moment of being part of something vast and joyful, something larger than his own small worries. Meanwhile, across town, another family gathers at the bus stop, bundled in coats and scarves. The mother carries a bag with sandwiches wrapped in greaseproof paper. The father jingles change in his pocket for fares, and the children bounce with anticipation. The bus rumbles into view, its paintwork shining red, and with a hiss of brakes they climb aboard, claiming a seat by the window. The journey itself is part of the treat, watching hedgerows and fields roll by, hearing the chatter of fellow passengers, the gentle sway of the bus as it rounds corners. When they arrive at the seaside, the air feels instantly different. It is sharp and salty, filled with the cries of gulls wheeling above. The children race ahead, their shoes crunching on sand, still damp from the retreating tide. The wind whips scarves across cheeks, but the chill only adds to the exhilaration. They build castles with hands already numb, chase waves that lick at their boots, and laugh when the sea soaks their hems. The parents watch with quiet smiles, glad for a day away from the routines of home. They pause at a small cafe near the promenade, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. A pot of tea is ordered, steaming cups set down on saucers that clink softly. Perhaps a treat is shared, a slab of bread and dripping, or if coins allow, a hot meat pie. The taste is hearty and grounding, the perfect foil for the cold air outside. Through the glass, the family can see couples strolling arm in arm, older men sitting on benches with newspapers, and children skipping stones into the waves. These sights, so ordinary, carry the magic of escape, of time suspended in the company of loved ones. Back in the city, the football match nears its end. The boy is hoarse from shouting, his hands numb from clapping. When the final whistle blows, whether his team has triumphed or not, there is a collective exhale, a flood of bodies moving toward the exits. The air outside is cold, but alive with voices retelling the best moments, the near misses, the brilliant saves, the thrill of victory or the sting of loss. He and his friends linger, replaying every detail, stamping their feet on the pavement as they begin the walk home. The streets echo with chants, but already the excitement softens into memory, something to be carried until next week. At the seaside, the afternoon light begins to fade. The tide creeps back in, erasing the castles and footprints left behind. The family gathers their things, brushing sand from coats and shaking it from shoes. The bus ride home is quieter than before. Children drowse against their parents, lulled by the gentle sway of the vehicle and the warmth of the day's adventures. Back in their own town, the lamps are beginning to glow, the streets familiar once more, yet the air of contentment remains, a memory tucked carefully alongside others, ready to be recalled in winters to come. Think for a moment about which of these afternoons you might choose. Would you stand on the terraces, your voice lost in the roar of the crowd, feeling the unity of strangers bound by loyalty to their team? Or would you take the bus to the seaside, the wind cold on your face, the sand gritty in your shoes, your heart light with the laughter of your family? Each carried its own flavor of joy, its own way of reminding people that weekends were not simply pauses in the working week, but precious chapters filled with life. And so, as Saturday afternoon drifts toward evening, Britain hums with this blend of voices and moments, some cheering in stadiums, some strolling on beaches, all finding their own way to rest, to connect, to savor. These scenes, layered with sound and scent, with laughter and longing, shape the weekends of a generation, weaving memory into the fabric of ordinary life. By late Saturday afternoon, the house settles into a slower rhythm. The errands of the morning, and the excitements of the afternoon give way to something quieter, warmer, and deeply comforting: tea time. In 1950s Britain, the family table was the heart of the weekend, a place where small rituals carried immense meaning. Picture the table laid with care, a cloth smoothed flat, plates arranged neatly, a teapot waiting to be filled. The air is heavy with the aroma of leaves steeping, mingling with the faint sweetness of baking that has drifted through the house all afternoon. The kettle whistles, the sound sharp but familiar, a call to gather. Cups are placed, teaspoons ready. The clink of china becomes part of the music of the moment, a gentle percussion to the softer sounds of voices. Firelight flickers in the hearth, shadows dancing against the wallpaper, while the rain outside begins to patter softly on the window panes. Imagine sipping warm tea as rain patters softly outside, the steam curling upward, the cup warming your hands, each sip carrying with it a moment of peace. In many homes, the spread was simple but lovingly prepared. Plates of sandwiches filled with cucumber, cheese, or sometimes leftover roast beef sat beside scones split open and spread with butter. If fortune allowed, there was jam too, ruby red and glistening, or a dollop of cream saved from the milk round. At the center of the table might stand a Victoria sponge, the kind that drew every eye the moment it was placed down. Light golden sponge, sandwiched with jam and cream, dusted with a careful layer of sugar, a cake not grand in size, but grand in its welcome. Imagine a grandmother at the table, her hand steady as she takes up the knife. She slices into the sponge with deliberate care, each piece passed out on small plates to waiting children. One child, impatient and cheeky, dips a finger into the jam as she turns her back, only to be caught with a smile that is more indulgent than scolding. The laughter that follows fills the room, bouncing against the clink of teaspoons and the soft scrape of chairs. These were the kinds of moments that stitched generations together, the gentle passing down of rituals, the warmth of being gathered close. Tea time was not only about food, it was about togetherness. After years of rationing, when luxuries were measured out in ounces and treats were rare, the simple act of placing cake on the table carried emotional weight. It meant there was enough, at least for now. It meant the war years of scarcity were fading, replaced with a cautious abundance that felt both new and fragile. Families savored the ritual not just for the flavors, but for the reassurance that life was slowly, steadily improving. Listen closely to the scene: the soft stir of teaspoons against china, the laughter of children retelling their small adventures of the day, the gentle murmur of adults discussing neighbors or the news. In the background, the wireless hums quietly, perhaps a light music program, its melodies weaving into the fabric of the afternoon. The fire crackles, casting a glow that makes the polished wood of the table shine. The air smells of butter and sugar, of tea leaves and coal smoke. The textures are rich, the softness of sponge cake, the crumb of a spoon, the warmth of the teacup in your palm. Not every table was alike, of course. In some homes, tea time was modest, just bread and margarine. perhaps a slice of homemade seed cake. In others, where wages stretched further, there might be Battenberg with its neat squares of pink and yellow, or a tin of biscuits kept hidden during the week. Yet whether simple or plentiful, the act of sitting together gave the meal its meaning. It was a pause in the day, a drawing in of the family circle, a reminder that even in a rapidly changing world, some rituals remain steady. Children often found their own small joys within the ritual. A boy might pile too much jam on his spoon, earning a gentle shake of the head from his mother. A girl might carefully mimic her grandmother, pouring tea into her cup as though she were grown. These moments, playful and ordinary, carried lessons in manners, patience, and care. They were lessons wrapped in sweetness, given without lectures, remembered long after childhood had passed. As the rain continued to fall outside, the house glowed warmer within. Curtains were drawn, lamps switched on, and the rest of the world seemed to fade. The table, simple yet rich with food and laughter, became a small island of comfort. The day had been full, but here was a time to breathe, to share, to simply be. And so, as you picture yourself at that table, ask, what would bring you the most comfort? Would it be the first bite of sponge cake, so soft it nearly melts? The warmth of tea spreading through you, sip by sip? Or perhaps just the quiet joy of being gathered with family, safe from the rain, wrapped in the glow of routine? Saturday tea time in 1950s Britain was more than a meal. It was a symbol of resilience, of love carried through food and ritual, of simple comforts treasured all the more because they had once been scarce. It was the gentle heartbeat of the weekend, steady and reassuring, leading families onward into the evening with warmth in their bellies and peace in their hearts. Saturday evening in 1950s, Britain carried with it a certain magic, a sense of stepping out of the ordinary and into something brighter, livelier, and just a little glamorous. After the calm of tea time, the lamps lit, and the rain tapping against windows, there came a moment when the younger generation, and often couples, began to prepare themselves for the night ahead. You can almost hear the rustle of coats being pulled from the rack, scarves looped snugly around necks, shoes polished to a shine in the firelight. The night promised laughter, music, and moments that lingered long after the weekend had faded. For many, the local cinema was the heart of Saturday evening. Picture it, a high street glowing softly under lamplight, a stream of people heading toward the picture house, voices low but animated. The facade is lit with bulbs, film posters proudly advertising the latest Hollywood imports, perhaps an Elvis picture or a sweeping romance starring Audrey Hepburn. The young couple joins the queue, stamping their feet to keep warm, scarves tucked against the chilly evening air. There's a buzz in the line, the shared anticipation of stepping into another world, one far removed from the cobbled streets and damp coats of Britain. The doors open, and the scent hits first, buttered popcorn, sweet and salty, mingling with cigarette smoke and the faint musk of old upholstery. Inside, coats are shed, hats tilted back, and tickets checked. The theater hums with the chatter of neighbors, recognizing one another, with the soft cough of someone settling into a seat, with the steady, comforting drone of the projector beginning to spin. As the lights dim, the young couple holds hands under the shared velvet armrest, hearts beating just a little faster as the opening credits spill onto the big screen. Can you hear it? The orchestra swell of the soundtrack filling the darkened room, the faint whir of the projector, constant and reassuring. The collective sigh of the audience as the first scene appears. For those 2 hours, they are transported to the streets of Paris, to the wide deserts of America, to places and adventures beyond the reach of post war austerity. The glamour of the silver screen brought light to everyday lives. And even as they filed back into the cool night air afterward, the spell of it lingered. But not everyone went to the cinema. For some, the real excitement was found in the thrum of a dance hall. Imagine it now. You step inside, greeted instantly by music swelling from the stage, a live band playing tunes, both familiar and thrillingly new. The floor is wooden, polished from the shuffle and spin of countless shoes. Perfume mingles with cigarette smoke, with the faint tang of beer from the bar. The air is warm with bodies moving close, skirts twirling, shoes tapping, laughter rising above the beat. In one corner, a teenage girl smooths her dress nervously, watching as others glide onto the floor. The band shifts into something more upbeat, perhaps an American rock and roll number that has only just reached British ears. Elvis Presley's voice, brash and full of swagger, filters through the amplifiers, and suddenly the whole hall seems alive. She takes a breath, accepts the hand of a boy she barely knows, and steps onto the floor. The wooden boards vibrate beneath their feet, the rhythm carrying them along, her shyness melting into the movement. For a moment, she feels utterly free. Dance halls were more than places to sway and spin. They were places of possibility. Friendships began here. Romances blossomed. Sometimes even futures were quietly shaped. In a decade where the war's shadow still lingered, but the promise of newness was growing, the dance hall was a space of hope, of youth asserting itself, of voices singing along to tunes that felt fresh and exciting. Music was shifting, tastes were changing, and you can sense the electricity in the air, the old waltz giving way to swing, to rock, to something that spoke to a new generation. Between the cinema and the dance hall, Saturday evenings reflected a blending of cultures. Hollywood's glamour arrived through the projector, offering a polished, dreamlike world. America's music arrived on vinyl and live stages, setting toes tapping and skirts swinging. Yet Britain gave these influences its own flavor. The cozy picture houses tucked into local high streets, the small town dance halls filled with neighbors who had known one another all their lives. It was both global and deeply local, both exciting and comfortingly familiar. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The hum of the projector, steady and hypnotic, or the swell of brass and drums echoing off the dance hall's walls. You can almost smell it too, the buttery sweetness of cinema popcorn, the warm press of perfume and smoke in the hall. These are the sensory anchors of the evening, grounding each memory in something tangible. And perhaps you're wondering, which would you choose? Would you sit hand in hand in the hush of a darkened cinema, letting yourself be carried away by the glow of the screen? Or would you spin beneath the lights of the dance hall, the music carrying you on till midnight, your cheeks flushed with movement and joy? Each choice has its own charm, its own rhythm, its own promise of memories made. So as the evening unfolds in your imagination, take your pick. Maybe you walk home arm in arm from the cinema, the night air crisp against your face, replaying favorite scenes as your footsteps echo on the pavement. Or maybe you linger at the dance hall until the band plays its final tune, the notes fading as you step into the cool night, your ears still humming with the music. Either way, Saturday night in 1950s Britain was alive with possibility, with laughter, with the warmth of being part of something bigger than yourself. And slowly, gently, the night draws to a close. Lamps flicker off one by one, streets grow quiet, and those who dance and those who dreamed on screen alike find their way back home, carrying the glow of the evening into the stillness of the night. Sunday morning in 1950s Britain was unlike any other time of the week. The pace of life, usually quick with the hum of work, errands, and noise, slowed almost to stillness. There was a reverence to the day, not only in the churches, but in the streets themselves, a hush that seemed to cover towns and villages alike. Shops were shuttered, their blinds drawn down, buses and trains ran with fewer routes, and even the sound of footsteps seemed softer somehow. Can you feel that hush of a world pausing just for one day each week? In many households, Sunday began with careful preparation. Clothes were laid out the night before, polished shoes, pressed shirts, neatly brushed coats. Mothers buttoned up cardigans for children. Fathers straightened ties in the mirror, the faint smell of starch clinging to collars. There was a sense of formality, even in modest homes, because Sunday was not just another day. It was an occasion, a rhythm that anchored the week. The kettle whistled, as it always did, but breakfast was simple: porridge, bread with butter, perhaps a rasher of bacon if the family was fortunate. The meal was eaten quietly, with the morning air crisp and bright filtering through the curtains. Imagine yourself stepping out into the street on such a morning. The cobblestones are damp with dew, glistening faintly in the pale light. Your breath forms soft clouds in the cool air, and the sound of your shoes against the ground feels almost amplified in the quiet. Ahead, others are walking the same way, coats buttoned, hymnals tucked under their arms. Some greet one another with nods or murmured words, but voices stay low, respectful, as though the stillness might shatter if anyone spoke too loudly. Then the sound comes: church bells, steady and resonant, rolling across rooftops and hedgerows. The chime calls out to everyone within earshot, a reminder, an invitation, and a rhythm that marked the start of every Sunday. Children sometimes tried to count the rings, their small faces lifted toward the steeple as the sound reverberated in their chests. To walk through those streets was to feel part of something larger, a community moving together in quiet procession. Inside the church, the atmosphere shifted again. The scent of polished wood rose from the pews, mingling with the faint aroma of candle wax and cold stone. Light filtered in through stained glass, catching in specks of dust that drifted in slow motion. As the organ began its first notes, deep and solemn, voices lifted together in hymns. The sound was not always perfectly tuned, but that was part of its beauty, a chorus of neighbors and families, each voice distinct and yet blending into something whole. The echo of those hymns filled the space, seeping into walls that had carried generations of similar mornings. Picture a child sitting on a pew, legs swinging slightly above the ground, the wood smooth beneath their fingertips. They shift restlessly during the sermon, but their mother's hand rests gently on their shoulder, anchoring them in stillness. They flip through the hymnal, tracing the black print on thin paper, trying to follow along with lips moving silently. For them, it may feel long, but there is comfort in the repetition, in the way every Sunday feels familiar, known, safe. For adults, church was not only worship, but also community. It was where neighbors exchanged quiet updates after the service, where friendships were renewed, and where important milestones, christenings, weddings, funerals, tied families into the fabric of shared life. In the 1950s, religion held a central place for many, shaping the week's rhythm, providing both spiritual grounding and social connection. To attend was both duty and comfort, a way of affirming not just faith, but belonging. Stepping back outside after the service, the stillness lingered. Streets remained quiet as shops and businesses observed the Sabbath rest. Children skipped ahead, their shoes clattering lightly against the pavement, while parents strolled behind, savoring the rare, unhurried pace. Some families would return home for an early dinner. Others might stop to chat briefly with friends before heading back to their own hearts. The whole world seemed slowed, gentler, softened. The sensory details of such a morning linger in memory. The firmness of a wooden pew beneath you, the musty scent of hymnals handled by countless hands, the distant bell still echoing in your chest as you walked home. The crispness of the air seemed to sharpen every sound. A dog barking in the distance, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the call of rooks wheeling above the churchyard. In its way, Sunday morning was a kind of collective pause. It was not about grandeur, nor even about the sermons themselves, so much as it was about shared stillness, about setting aside the ordinary rush and noise of the week, to walk through those quiet streets, to sit in the cool hush of the church, to hear voices rising in song. It was a reminder that life was more than work and errands. It was about connection, both earthly and spiritual, and about honoring time itself by slowing down. And as you picture yourself there, seated in a pew or walking beneath the soft toll of bells, you might wonder, how would it feel to live in a world that truly stopped just once a week, so that everyone could breathe, reflect, and simply be? That was the rhythm of Sunday in 1950s Britain. And for many, it was the most peaceful note in the melody of the weekend. By late Sunday morning, the stillness of church bells gives way to something altogether homelier, the gentle bustle of kitchens preparing for the meal that defined the week. The Sunday roast was more than just food. It was ritual, comfort, and celebration wrapped into one. For families across 1950s Britain, it was the heart of the weekend, the moment when everyone gathered together, no matter how busy or scattered life might otherwise be. The scene begins with aromas. First, the rich, mouth-watering scent of meat slowly roasting, beef or lamb, if the household could manage it, chicken or pork in humbler kitchens. The crackle of fat spitting in the pan punctuates the warmth of the oven, a sound that promises abundance. You can almost feel the air thickening with savory perfume drifting through hallways and drawing children toward the kitchen, noses twitching, stomachs rumbling. Alongside it comes the comforting smell of potatoes roasting to a golden crisp, edges darkened just so, waiting to be paired with ladles of thick gravy. Yorkshire puddings were a marvel all their own, rising in the heat, their edges puffing into crisp hollows that seemed miraculous in their transformation. From a thin batter poured into hot tins, they became airy and golden, ready to soak up gravy. Carrots, peas, cabbage, often boiled until soft, sometimes with a knob of butter or a sprinkle of salt, added color to the plate, each vegetable bearing the mark of the garden or the greengrocer's stall. Can you picture it? The clatter of pans, the hiss of steam as lids are lifted, the cheerful chaos of a kitchen alive with purpose. A mother checks the roast, basting carefully, while children are given small tasks, setting forks and knives neatly, polishing glasses, folding napkins with exaggerated care. A father might carve the joint once it reached the table, the steady scrape of knife against bone, slices arranged proudly on a platter. The whole process was a performance of sorts, repeated week after week, familiar yet cherished. One mini story comes to mind. A boy of 10, sleeves rolled up, carefully placing plates at each seat, trying to copy the precision of his mother's hands. He sneaks a crisp potato when her back is turned, only to be caught by the knowing glance of his grandmother, who hides a smile. At the same time, a younger sister hovers by the oven, drawn irresistibly to the warm glow, waiting for her chance to steal a spoonful of gravy once it's poured. These small mischiefs were part of the rhythm, part of what made the meal so alive. At the table, anticipation builds. Plates are passed, potatoes piled high, Yorkshire puddings claimed with a little rivalry over who gets the crispiest. The meat is carved, slices laid carefully, with perhaps the juiciest piece saved for the head of the table. The gravy boat makes its rounds, leaving trails of richness across each plate, its aroma so deep and comforting you can almost taste it in the air. If you close your eyes, can you smell that gravy wafting through the house? The roast carried more than just flavor, it carried meaning. In the lingering shadow of wartime rationing, which only fully ended in the mid 1950s, to place a joint of meat at the table was a symbol of stability. It spoke of recovery, of prosperity returning, however slowly. Meat had been scarce during the war, and even after, it was precious. A roast was not just sustenance, but a statement. The family was together. There was enough. Life was moving forward. Conversations rose and fell with the clink of cutlery. Children recounted the small dramas of school. Fathers might remark on football scores or neighbors' news. Mothers shared stories of errands or visits. Laughter threaded through it all, echoing off walls, binding everyone together. For a time, worries were set aside. The table became a place of safety, of belonging, of joy in the ordinary. Each family had their own variations. Some favored lamb with mint sauce, others beef with horseradish. In some homes, the roast might be modest, chicken stretched to feed many, or vegetables making up the bulk of the plate. Yet even in its simplest form, the roast carried the same weight. It was tradition, shared across class and region, a common thread that tied the nation together each Sunday. The sensory richness was unforgettable. The gleam of gravy shining on potatoes, the soft give of a Yorkshire pudding beneath the fork, the tender meat yielding under knife and teeth, the sound of laughter bubbling as freely as the kettle once had that morning, the feel of warmth radiating from oven and hearth alike. Even the smallest details, the creak of a chair, the soft ring of a spoon against glass, became part of the texture of the meal. And when plates were cleared, there was often pudding to follow, perhaps a simple apple crumble, baked until golden and topped with custard poured thick and sweet, or a treacle sponge, its richness sticking to the spoon, the sweetness a perfect counterpoint to the savory feast that came before. Dessert was not extravagant, but it was treasured, the final flourish that sealed the ritual. As the meal drew to a close, satisfaction filled the room. Stomachs heavy, voices softened. The family lingered just a little longer, reluctant to leave the table's warmth. Dishes would soon be washed, the clatter of crockery returning, but for a while, all was still, all was content. And so the Sunday roast remained the heart of the weekend, not just in the food itself, but in the way it drew people together, in the sense of continuity it offered, in the quiet reassurance that no matter what the week brought, there would always be this meal, this table, this gathering. After the fullness of the Sunday roast, the afternoon softened into a slower, gentler rhythm. The clatter of plates and pans gave way to quiet, the kind of stillness that settled not just in rooms, but in minds and bodies too. Outside, the air might still be damp with morning dew or touched with a weak sun struggling through the clouds. But inside, warmth lingered, the oven cooling, the fire glowing, the scent of gravy and sponge pudding hanging faintly in the air. Families often drifted toward the living room, each carrying their own small rituals of rest. The wireless, perched proudly on a shelf or table, soon became the heart of the afternoon. A twist of a knob, a faint crackle, and then voices filled the space. Familiar, comforting, sometimes witty, sometimes solemn. In countless homes across the country, the BBC provided the backdrop to Sunday afternoons, stitching a national fabric of sound and story. Picture it, a family gathered close, armchairs pulled in, children sprawling on the rug. The comedy program begins, laughter rising from the radio like a friend dropping by unannounced. Father leans back, pipe in hand, chuckling softly at a joke he's heard a dozen times before. Mother's knitting needles click gently, her hands working without thought as the story unfolds. The children giggle at the sillier lines, their laughter tumbling into the pauses between punchlines. It is a scene at once ordinary and precious, a family together, sharing the same sounds, the same moments, the same smile. In another home, the scene is quieter still. A child lies on their stomach across the carpet, colored pencils spread around them like a rainbow, sketching shapes and scenes only they can imagine. The radio hums softly in the background, not so much commanding attention as filling the silence with comfort. Father rustles the pages of the Sunday newspaper, turning them slowly, the sound sharp against the hush. Mother sips from a teacup, savoring the warmth even as she lets her eyes drift across a magazine. The clock on the mantel ticks steadily, marking the minutes with a patience that suits the day. Can you hear it? The gentle rustle of paper, the crackle of the radio signal, the deep tick-tock of the clock. These sounds layer together into a symphony of stillness, a soundtrack that carried no urgency, only reassurance. The very texture of Sunday afternoons seemed built from these details, sounds and silences weaving together into something timeless. For many, the radio was more than entertainment. It was connection. In an age with limited channels of culture, the BBC reached into every home, offering the same voices, the same programs, the same sense of being part of something larger. A drama broadcast on Sunday afternoon might be the topic of conversation come Monday morning, binding communities not only in their routines, but in their imaginations. The voices of presenters and actors became companions, their tones familiar enough to feel like neighbors. Sometimes the programs carried music, orchestras playing softly, or singers whose voices floated through the static. Sometimes it was news, the calm cadence of the announcer relaying the events of the wider world. But more often, it was comedy or light drama, shows designed to amuse, to ease, to wrap the day in warmth. In the living room, laughter echoed quietly, smiles passing between family members who might not even glance up from their knitting or papers. The shared sound was enough. Children, especially, learned the rhythm of these afternoons, the slow passage of time, the comfort of voices rising and falling. They might drift into daydreams, eyes tracing patterns in the rug, or wander to the window to watch raindrops slide down the glass. In the background, the wireless kept them company, its glow a small beacon in the corner of the room. These memories, gentle and understated, often became some of the most cherished in later years. There was also something collective, almost sacred, about the quiet of Sundays. With shops closed and streets hushed, families were encouraged to turn inward. The limited entertainment options didn't feel like deprivation. Rather, they deepened the significance of what was available. A single program could carry a whole household into laughter or thought. A single voice could fill the emptiness of an afternoon. The scarcity of choice made each sound more precious, each ritual more lasting. Perhaps you can imagine yourself there now, stretched out on the carpet, pencil in hand, drawing absent-mindedly as the voice of a radio comedian filters through the room. Or maybe you're in the armchair, the crackle of the fire behind you, a newspaper spread open on your lap as the steady tick of the mantel clock reminds you that time, for once, is not rushing by. It is simply flowing, gently, steadily, as the afternoon drifts onward. In these small moments, there was no need for grandeur. The radio's glow, the rustle of pages, the warmth of the fire, together, they formed a kind of quiet companionship that made the weekend whole. They were not dramatic, yet they mattered deeply. They were the spaces between the louder events of the week, the gentle breaths that gave life its rhythm. And so, Sunday afternoons in 1950s, Britain became memories of comfort, of family togetherness, of a national culture shared through wires and airwaves. Even now, if you listen closely, you might still hear the faint crackle of a wireless, the rustle of paper, the steady tick of a clock. They are the sounds of stillness, the sounds of a world content to pause, if only for a few hours each week. Sunday evening in 1950s, Britain carried a mood all its own, a blend of comfort and quiet nervousness, of rituals performed almost without thought, of the bittersweet awareness that the weekend was gently closing its doors. The house, once lively with laughter and the hum of the roast, settled into a slower rhythm again. Lamps glowed warmly in corners, the fire burned low, and the wireless murmured softly in the background. Outside, the streets grew still, as if the whole neighborhood were exhaling together, bracing for the week to come. Do you remember the quiet nervousness of Sunday nights, balanced by the comfort of being home? In the kitchen, a mother moved steadily between ironing board and basket. The hiss of steam rose each time the iron pressed against cotton, the scent of hot fabric mingling with faint traces of starch. School shirts were smoothed, pleats sharpened, collars pressed firm. She worked with care, knowing each detail mattered come morning. Nearby, socks were sorted, buttons checked, small repairs made quickly with needle and thread. It was work, yes, but also a gesture of love, ensuring that her children stepped into the new week neat, ready, and cared for. Meanwhile, in the living room, a father sat with polish and brush in hand. Shoes lined neatly before him gleamed under his touch. The rich, sharp smell of polish drifting into the air. With steady strokes, he brought out their shine, buffing until each pair reflected the firelight. The rhythm of the brush was steady, almost meditative, a sound that joined the soft hum of the wireless and the ticking of the clock. For many fathers, this small act was as much pride as duty. Shoes well polished meant dignity, preparedness, and respectability for the week ahead. Around the table, children bent over their books, pencils scratching across paper in hurried strokes. Homework left too long was now being finished with frowns and sighs, the effort of concentration mingling with drowsy glances toward the clock. A boy recited spelling words under his breath, while his sister practiced sums, tapping her pencil against her lip. Every so often, a parent would glance over, offering a gentle reminder or a word of encouragement. Though sometimes fraught with last minute panic, even this ritual carried its own comfort, the reassurance that tasks were completed, that tomorrow would not arrive unprepared. The sensory details of Sunday evenings layered together in subtle ways. The hiss of the iron rising and falling, the crisp smell of freshly pressed fabric, the sharp tang of polish on leather, mixed with the faint earthy scent of coal smoke from the fire, the muted crackle of the wireless, playing a quiet program that no one listened to intently, but all found soothing. And beneath it all, the ticking of the clock, steady as a heartbeat, reminding everyone that time was moving on. There was emotion in the air too, a wistfulness, perhaps, as children thought back to Saturday's laughter or the warmth of Sunday dinner. The weekend's brightness faded into something softer, quieter, but there was comfort in the routines, in the way every Sunday evening followed the same script. They were rituals that prepared not just uniforms and shoes, but minds and hearts, a gentle easing from rest into readiness. Imagine sitting at the table, pencil in hand, listening to the rhythmic brush of your father's polishing, the quiet rustle of your mother's ironing. There's a small knot of nervousness in your stomach, thinking of Monday lessons, but it's soothed by the simple security of being surrounded by family, of knowing that the house is warm, your clothes are ready, and you are not alone in your anticipation. That was the magic of Sunday evenings. They reminded you that, while the week ahead might be daunting, home was steady, unchanging, safe. Some children found secret pleasures in these evenings, the glow of the fire casting long shadows for their imaginations to chase, or the simple pride of seeing their shoes lined up in shining rows, ready for morning. Parents, too, might pause in their chores, sharing a look that held both tiredness and quiet satisfaction. They knew that life was not grand, nor easy, but in the calm order of a Sunday evening, there was reassurance enough. The wireless, steady in the background, often carried soft music or a drama. Voices rose and fell, weaving stories that no one fully followed, but which gave a kind of companionship to the room. A final cup of tea might be poured, its steam curling gently, sipped as the ironing board was folded away and homework tucked into satchels. These small acts, closing one week and opening another, had their own beauty. And as bedtime approached, the house grew quieter still. Shoes, polished to a gleam, were placed by the door. Uniforms, crisp and neatly folded, lay ready on chairs. Books were closed, pencils put away, lights dimmed. Outside, the night deepened, the silence stretching, broken only by the occasional sound of a car or the distant bark of a dog. Inside, though, everything was prepared, everything in its place. Sunday evenings in 1950s Britain were tinged with melancholy, yes, but also filled with love. They reminded families of what they had, of the small securities built from routine, from care, from the gentle work of hands preparing for tomorrow. They were the quiet heartbeat of the week's ending, steady, reliable, filled with the tender knowledge that life carried on, one Sunday night at a time. As the weekend draws to a close in our journey through 1950s Britain, it feels fitting to pause and look back at what we've wandered through together. We began with the hum of Friday evenings, men coming home with pay packets in their pockets, the smell of vinegar-soaked chips filling kitchens, and children bright with excitement at the thought of 2 free days ahead. We moved through Saturday's bustling markets, the sound of coins clinking and traders calling, and we lingered in the glow of family teas, seaside breezes, football crowds, and the romance of cinema lights. Then came Sunday, a day of quiet reverence, of roast slowly cooking in the oven, laughter shared at the table, radios murmuring in cozy rooms, and uniforms and shoes made ready for the week to come. Each moment stitched together into a tapestry of ordinary life, steady and sure, simple yet rich. What lingers most is not the grand events, but the gentleness of routine. In the years just after the war, Britain carried with it a certain resilience, a determination to move forward. The scars of rationing and rebuilding were still present, yet people found joy in the smallest of things. The crackle of a wireless program, the comfort of tea poured into familiar cups, the sight of children dashing into the street with coins jingling in their hands. These weren't just pastimes, they were rituals that anchored families, that offered stability in a world still remembering hardship. There's something soothing in how life unfolded at a slower pace. Weekends weren't overloaded with errands or screens. Instead, they were punctuated by small, deliberate pleasures. The act of polishing shoes, of slicing a cake, of gathering around a radio comedy, each felt meaningful, shared, and grounding. Perhaps that's what makes these memories so resonant, even decades later. They remind us that peace can be found not in abundance, but in attention to the ordinary. Imagine yourself carrying one of those traditions into your own weekend. Would it be the warmth of a Saturday market, with its chatter and scents, and simple exchanges of trust between shopper and shopkeeper? Or would it be the hush of a Sunday morning, dew still clinging to the grass as bells rang out across the town? Maybe you'd choose the indulgence of a Sunday roast, with its rich aroma drifting from the oven, laughter spilling over plates and gravy boats. Which of these cozy traditions would you carry into your own weekends today? The beauty of remembering is that it doesn't ask us to live in the past, only to learn from it, to take a fragment of those slower rhythms, those grounding rituals, and bring them into the present. Maybe it's pausing for tea in the afternoon. Maybe it's polishing a pair of shoes until they shine. Or maybe it's simply giving yourself permission to do nothing at all on a Sunday, to let the world hush for a while. And as you think about that, notice how calm your own body feels, resting here, listening. The way nostalgia can soften the edges of the day, wrapping you in warmth the way lamplight wrapped those cozy sitting rooms of long ago. There's comfort in knowing that across time, people have always sought the same thing: rest, connection, and the reassurance of home. The weekends of 1950s Britain may feel distant now, yet their essence is timeless. They remind us that life is made rich not by constant novelty, but by the familiar joys repeated week after week: the clink of teaspoons, the hum of the kettle, the embrace of family and friends. These rituals are like lullabies, steadying us, grounding us, preparing us for the days ahead. So as this story draws to a close, let yourself drift into that same steady rhythm. Picture the glow of a fire fading low, shoes lined neatly by the door, the faint crackle of a wireless drifting into silence. Let the hush of Sunday night wrap around you like a blanket. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, but for now, You can rest in the gentle, nostalgic comfort of weekends gone by. And so, dear listener, we come gently to the end of our journey together. A weekend in 1950s Britain, seen through quiet streets, bustling markets, seaside breezes, family tables, and the tender rhythms of home. I want to thank you for keeping me company tonight. These moments are more than stories. They're threads of connection between past and present, between one quiet evening and the next. If you enjoyed this journey, a like or a subscribe means more than you know. It helps these stories reach others who, like you, might be seeking a calm corner of history to rest within. I'm always touched to hear where you're listening from across cities, countries, and time zones. We've created our own little circle of calm, joined by a love of history and the simple desire for rest. So, if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from tonight. It's always such a comfort to see our global community share in this gentle pause together. Now, as the story draws to its close, imagine yourself stepping out of the cozy home we've wandered through. The lamplight glows softly in the window, flickering like a heartbeat against the dark. Inside, the kettle has boiled and cooled, leaving behind that faint metallic warmth. A fire crackles low, its embers fading, the room now hushed except for the steady tick of a mantel clock. Outside, the streets are emptying, curtains are drawn, chimneys release thin ribbons of smoke into the cool night air, and the world is winding down. Let that imagery settle over you. The hush of a Sunday evening, the fading warmth of a weekend well lived, a stillness that speaks of safety, of routine, of home. Imagine walking slowly through that street, your footsteps soft against the pavement, the air crisp but gentle. Doors close, voices fade, and you are surrounded by quiet. Doesn't it feel restful to know that life slows down, that the pace of the day eases into silence? These are the moments meant to carry you into sleep. No need to hold on to the details or the history now, just the feeling. The way small rituals, a polished shoe, a brewed cup of tea, a story shared at the table, become anchors, grounding you in warmth. Let them rest with you now, like a soft blanket across your shoulders. As you close your eyes, picture the glow of that lamplight dimming, the street outside empty, peaceful. The weekend of 1950s, Britain gently folding itself away, like neatly pressed clothes laid out for the morning. You don't need to do anything more. The story is complete. The night is calm, and you are safe here. So let go, slowly, softly. Let the weekend stay with you, carrying you not into Monday, but into dreams. And as you drift, may you feel the comfort of those small joys, the laughter around tables, the hush of church bells, the warmth of family by the fire. Let them linger only as a gentle impression, fading like the last ember in a grate. Thank you for being here tonight, for walking this nostalgic path with me. Until next time, rest well, sleep deeply, and know that you're part of a story that stretches across time, a story of simple comforts and of finding peace in the quiet moments we share.